David Lloyd George's conduct during the Anglo-Irish treaty negotiations in 1922 involved explicit threats of renewed warfare and extreme violence in an attempt to compel the Irish delegation into agreement. The coercive nature of Lloyd George's tactic is contextualised by British imperial policy at this time. Similar methods of suppression and control had been deployed in other colonies. When revolution had broken out in Egypt in 1919, the British Army had used live ammunition in close proximity and killed at least 800 people, on top of mass arrests and putting Cairo under martial law. In Ireland itself, they'd already deployed ferocious forces like the Blacks and Tans and the Auxiliaries. In 1919 in India, there was the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Again, they opened fire on a large crowd of unarmed civilians, kill over 1,000 people, and put Punjab under martial law. In India, they also used flogging and humiliation and the suppression of the press. In South Africa, from 1899 to 1902, Britain had established concentration camps for Black Africans and white Boers. By 1921, they've set up Palestine as British mandate, and there are numerous riots where British forces massacre Arab civilians. This was clearing the way for Israel. In Iraq in 1920, there was a revolt. The British respond with aerial bombing, poison gas, one of the first examples of modern air warfare on civilians. David Lloyd George was a British Liberal politician. He was the Minister for Munitions and the Secretary of State and War during the First World War, and the Prime Minister during negotiations with the Irish. Born to Welsh parents in Manchester, he did go into politics opposing the Boer War as a Liberal. But once in power, he became one of the most pragmatic and hard-edged imperial administrators Britain had ever seen. This pattern of the imperial administrator type, the public figure who enters public life through moral and professional legitimacy, but then is absorbed into the machinery of the empire and uses their skills to rationalize coercion, protect a foreign power. Entry through service and the promise of reform gives credibility to the figure before they shift to elite alignment. In the 20th century, David Lloyd George threatened Ireland with immediate and terrible war. And in the 21st century, Keir Starmer is calling Palestine action a national security threat. Both of these men preserved City of London influence, imposing debt arrangements on the Free State, and profiteering from complicity and silence in the empire. Active courtship of weapons and capital industries, censorship to suppress dissent. David Lloyd George is remembered as a war leader and a social reformer, but his most lasting contribution is as imperial administrator. Used moral appeal to enter power, and then uses his position to protect the empire, preserves Britain's global structure through threats and repression and financial control. Like Keir Starmer, Lloyd George is not best understood through his personality or his beliefs or his policies. He's best judged with how he reacted under pressure, how he managed the decline of the British Empire by buying time for imperial interests and treating violence as order. Lloyd George used military law to discipline the workers in England. In 1916, he uses emergency powers to strengthen the central control, bypasses Parliament in support of war operations. If you go back a few years, you see Lloyd George was deeply involved in the capitalisation of industrial expansion. He made money off war. Where have you heard that before? He designed the Treaty of Versailles. He was presented publicly at the time as the peacemaker, but the Treaty of Versailles is an imperial carve-up. It's all about resource control, especially in the Middle East. He refuses to recognise the Irish Republic, and he deploys the Black and Tans. He's responsible for Bloody Sunday, and in 1921 he tells Irish delegates that if they don't sign immediately, They need only look to any of Britain's colonies to see what Britain will do. And it involves concentration camps. Across the empire, his government has a strategy for counterinsurgency, and they are getting more desperate as time marches on. So they are going to intern you and execute you and put you under military control and curfew. And they will do anything they can, mandates, League of Nations, to secure legitimacy, the imperial pretense. Must keep control of the strategic oil routes. This government lays the groundwork for what happens later. What happens in Kenya in the 50s. Collective punishment. Concentration camps again. He gets praised in Britain as being a wartime leader and a progressive reformer and the skilled negotiator who settled Ireland. But he was threatening genocide as his that was your only negotiation tactic. If we didn't agree with him, he was going to butcher and slaughter every man, woman and child who existed on the island. And they were doing it in India, so it wasn't a lie. And all of this is done in service to the City of London. He lies to the British public to preserve these economic extraction systems in other countries. Britain doesn't benefit from either, but he does. Understanding Lloyd George requires us to remove the myth of moral leadership and look at how the British Empire maintained power and defended itself through repetitive defeats. He's not uniquely cruel, just highly skilled and highly indoctrinated into an already incredibly violent global system.